Is that a transcript of your entire testimony at the grand jury in April of 2022?
I believe so, yes.
You've reviewed it in the past?
I have read it about a year ago, yes.
You read it in anticipation of your testimony a year ago, correct?
Yes, I reviewed it.
Have you reviewed it in preparation for your testimony today?
No, I haven't.
Yesterday. Ms. McCabe, turn to the page or pages in that transcript where you recount to the grand jurors that my client said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
This is over 227 pages.
Take your time.
How long did you say it was, Ms. McCabe?
227?
Hi, Crime Junkie jurors. Today is April 30th, 2025, and we just wrapped up day 7 of Karen Reed's second trial. Now, the entire day consisted of Jen McCabe on the witness stand. The first hour was prosecutor Hank Brennan wrapping up his line of questioning, and the entire rest of the day was spent with defense attorney Alan Jackson on cross-examination. And y'all, it got heated. So let's get into the recap. First, let's talk about the direct examination. So prosecutor Brennan starts to walk Jen through a line of questioning where Jen's kind of giving us some details. She says after the group left Waterfall Bar, she had a conversation with John O'Keefe on the phone on the way to 34 Fairview. Jen says that she gave John O'Keefe directions using Bella's mom's house as a landmark. Now, John O'Keefe dated Bella's mom years ago, and when Jen was searching for John with Carrie and Karen the next morning, she said that Karen brought it up, asking if John could potentially be there. Now, Brennan wanted to introduce this because he says that this goes toward motive. Part of their theory is that Karen became enraged and jealous after Jen McCabe brought up Bella's mom's house as a landmark, and that led to a fight, which resulted in Karen hitting John with her car. So to me, this sounds like a stretch for motive, but let me know what you think in comments. Do you think that this could be motive for murder? Now, something that we saw a lot of during direct examination was prosecutor Brennan and Jen McCabe working to kind of fill any holes or issues with testimony that had been brought up previously. Now, if you didn't watch the first trial and you're new to the case, or if you just need a refresher, I'm going to break this down for you just a little bit. So when John, Karen, and Carrie arrived at 34 Fairview and found John that morning, it was Jen McCabe who called 911, and that call was actually played for the jury today. Now, last year, the call ignited a social media firestorm when people heard Jen McCabe tell the dispatcher in kind of flat tone, there's a man passed out in the snow. Now, that got a lot of attention with people questioning why she would refer to John O'Keefe as just a guy in the snow if that's her close friend. Now, Brennan asked her about this today, and she said that she was trying to be as calm as she could and give the most specific details that she could. So kind of explaining why there was this big issue and how it shouldn't be. Now, another example of this is the question of whether Karen Reed asked Jen McCabe to Google how long to die in the cold at 6:24 a.m. Now, the defense says that she didn't ask Jen McCabe to do that. The prosecution says, oh, yes, she did. Now, previously, Jen described being in the back of the police cruiser when this happened, but the audio would have caught it on the dash cam. So that testimony was heavily questioned. Now, this time she made a point to say that they were in the back of the cruiser and then stepped out. And then that's when Karen asked her. One other thing that was noticeable during the discussion today of the Google search, Jen was telling the jury what she says she remembers about this. And she says that she thinks she may have misspelled stuff the first time and then had to Google it again. Now, the reason that this stood out to me is because the way that Jen said it was kind of like she was trying to recall a memory. She's like, maybe I think maybe I spelled something wrong. But was she recalling a memory? Now, here's the thing. These two searches have been highly publicized and analyzed and scrutinized, and she had to answer a lot of questions about them last year also, including a very heated exchange between Jen and attorney Alan Jackson about the searches and the misspellings. The way that she said this, it felt a little coached or rehearsed maybe, which the defense attorney will bring up later. So I want to know, what did y'all think about it? Did it seem rehearsed? Or did it seem totally genuine? Let me know in comments. Now, here's another example of kind of tying up some loose ends on direct. Jen describes going into her sister's house at Fairview to wake them up after Officer Lank, a longtime friend, had asked her to. Now, last year, people had a lot of questions about this because Nicole and Brian Albert said that Jen came busting into the room, hysterical, yelling that John was dead. And everyone wanted to know, where was Chloe when this happened? Their dog. And how was she not going crazy if Jen was busting into their room early in the morning? It's like still dark outside, everybody's asleep, and the dog's not barking. So this time, Jen says that she thinks that she knocked on the door first and then opened the door and then walked in, but she was aware of her surroundings and knowing she's about to wake up her sister and her brother-in-law, and that would startle them. It was just very different than what her sister had described last year about hysterical Jen busting in. So could that be another way to tie things up? And then finally, Jen was showed dash cam video where she pointed out who was who, including the female EMT and Officer Saraf. Now, another big issue in last year's testimony was Saraf saying that he never heard Karen say, "I hit him." But the female EMT said that Karen did say that and that she said it in front of Saraf. So Brennan stops the dash cam video at a time when Saraf actually kind of turns his back. And he asks if this is the time that Karen is saying that I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. And he asks about her being in shock in her initial interviews to kind of explain away why she didn't give some of the key statements at that time, like the cracked tail light or Karen asking, could I have hit him? Did I hit him? Now, Brennan's line of questioning seemed to really heavily rely on his experience as a defense attorney, because it was kind of like he was predicting all of the issues that could potentially come up on cross and then trying to tackle them in direct before he wrapped up. So very interesting tactic. Now, after about an hour, Prosecutor Brennan was done and defense attorney Alan Jackson began cross-examination. He first asked Jen about her relationship with Carrie Roberts, and we heard a lot of the same information here that we heard from Carrie. They weren't friends before, they're friends now. They've been together almost every time they've done some kind of police interaction or grand jury testimony. But Jackson also asked about Jen's communications with the DA's office, and then he walks through the Albert family tree, the connections they all have to each other and to law enforcement and positions of power. Now, there has also been a very big change in Jen's demeanor from last year, and Jackson actually asks her if she were coached or instructed on changing her demeanor based on how she performed in the last trial, including like the background that she gives and stuff like that. For example, Jen mentioning yesterday that she's just a normal small town mom, and then she told the jury today too, I'm just a normal mom. So Jen says no. Now, just before we start to get really into things with Jen's cross, there's a morning recess. Same as always, but this time something happens. So Prosecutor Brennan calls defense attorney Jackson and Jen McCabe into a back room and closes the door, according to reporter David Bynick. Now, the other prosecutors are also there. Not much time passes, but Jen McCabe then leaves with Assistant DA Ms. McLaughlin. Now, after that, the judge says that she wants to see the lawyers and immediate family only. And the court clerk tells the media that they all have to leave. So the O'Keefes walk in the courtroom, and then the court officers tell everyone waiting outside in the hall that they have to go to the first floor. They kicked them off the floor. So Karen's parents leave the courtroom too, and then everyone is sent downstairs. Now, there's no word of what's happening until finally Hank Brennan is out of the courtroom. He's entering the DA's office with John's brother, Paul O'Keefe. Nobody knows why. Then Paul leaves the DA's office, and then after that, Brennan leaves, and then everyone just kind of goes back upstairs with nothing else said, no explanation, nothing. And the family of John O'Keefe, they were noticeably in different seats when they came back in. And reporter Christina Rex noted that after lunch, the court officers actually asked Paul O'Keefe to move to the back row in the courtroom instead of the front row, which he did. So there's no official confirmation on what happened, but this mystery break had everyone talking and speculating. Now, after that, Alan Jackson resumes his cross of Jen McCabe. Okay, so here are the highlights of this. Now, today we got some new information. We found out about the FBI contacting Jen and a little bit of detail about how it went down. So the agents were outside of Jen's house and they first approached her by walking up to her car. Now, she said that she didn't know who they were and she thought that they were selling something. So she lied. She was like, I'm not Jen McCabe, I'm Nicole. Now, after that, they called her while they were still outside and she agrees to meet with them, but she says she needs 10 minutes to get ready. So during that 10 minutes, I guess she calls her husband, Matt McCabe, and she calls Carrie Roberts, and she calls Mrs. O'Keefe, and she calls the DA's office. She said she was wanting to talk to the advocate there. But when the agents come in to talk to her, they ask her if she has talked to anyone else during that 10 minutes, and I guess she said no. So they interviewed Jen briefly, but she says she didn't feel comfortable answering any more questions, and she cut the interview off. Now, after the agents left, she talked to her husband, Matt, who apparently told her that she needs to call the agents back and tell them that she did talk to people in that time. So she does. Now, Jen and AJ go back and forth about this because AJ is like, hey, this is a lie. And Jen's like, oh, no, I forgot. But she says she forgot, although the calls were only like minutes before she was asked that. So I don't know. Let me know what you think. This is new information. And also, during this line of questioning, Jackson slipped up a few times and he said the word agents. And at one point, the judge instructed him to be careful with the words he uses. The jury isn't actually allowed to know about the federal investigation, which is why he can't say agents. So think about it like this. If they know that the feds got involved, the jury could end up kind of speculating about why or what that means or what they found or what they didn't find. And that could potentially influence how they look at things. And that could cause a big mess. So it's kept from them for various reasons, although it did slip out in the last trial through one of the witnesses that mentioned the feds. Now, another topic that Jackson tried to really pin down is the parking situation. We'll hear more about this as trial goes on because Jen McCabe says she remembers Brian Higgins' white Jeep parked in front of the mailbox, and other witnesses say it wasn't there. We know that Higgins was still at the house, and where the cars were parked has an impact on how far back Karen could have driven if she were going in reverse to hit John O'Keefe. So it's something that we will hear more of. Everybody kind of has different recollections on who was parked where. Now, Jen also described seeing Karen's SUV when she looked out the window while at Fairview, although she works really hard to kind of avoid some questions about when she sent texts and when she looked outside. And based on her testimony before and her previous statements, she looked outside around 3 or 4 times minimum. But today it took her like 12 minutes of questioning to get her to like acknowledge or accept that. So maybe she thinks that every question is a trick question on cross-examination. They continue to talk about Jen looking outside, and Jen says she remembers seeing tire tracks, but never saw a body in the yard, even when they were leaving. And she says she never heard any tire screeching, no screaming, no signs of impact, nothing like that. Now, Jackson brings up Jen coordinating testimony, and then he goes through some examples, like making the timeline with Carrie Roberts and asking Julie Nagel, who was at the house, for a screenshot of text messages to find out when her brother got to Fairview so that she would have a better idea of when Karen pulled up. Although he points out she never actually gave that screenshot to the police. Then Jackson brings up an inconsistency in Jen's testimony, pointing out that Jen testified yesterday that it was whiteout conditions when they got to Fairview and found John. And she was making the point that I guess it was kind of suspicious that Karen was able to see John from the car because she said that she had to walk all the way over there and get, quote unquote, very close to be able to even recognize that it was a body. But Jackson reads the transcripts from last year, and Jen testified that she got out of the passenger side of the car, and then she gave very specific details about what she could see from that far away, like Karen straddling John and lifting her shirt to try to warm him with her body heat, and Carrie removing the snow from his face. And the reason that this matters is because it kind of goes toward the main theme the defense seems like they're trying to make, that the stories of everyone involved seem to be kind of molding into each other, and nobody's recollections are really their own. And that brings us to the final point of the day. Did Karen Reed say, I hit him, or did I hit him? Now, Jen testified yesterday that she heard Karen say, I hit him 3 times. She's very clear. And Jen also testified to that in the last trial. But Jackson points out that Jen gave multiple police interviews. And those reports say that Jen told them that Karen said, could I have hit him? Did I hit him? Jen now says that those police reports are not correct and that she told Proctor and Lank that Karen said that. So they must not have put it in their reports. Pretty important thing to leave out, though. Then Jackson brings up Jen's grand jury testimony. Now, there are more than 200 pages in the transcript, and Jackson hands it to Jen on the stand and asks her to turn to the page where she told the grand jury that Karen said, "I hit him." Jen looks at the transcript and she's like, this is hundreds of pages. And Jackson says, "Take your time." Wow. But here's the thing. There's no page that says that because Jen never said that to the grand jury. And Jackson wanted to make that point to the jury. He says there are 12 times that Jen McCabe testified about what was said. And every time it was that Karen asked, could I have hit him? Not stated it. So that's it for today. Day 7 was wild, y'all. There's no court tomorrow, so rest up because we will be back Friday morning and Jackson will continue his cross of Jen McCabe. And let me know, what were the biggest moments in court for you today? Let me know in comments. I want to hear what y'all have to say. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all live for day 8 on Friday morning, 9 a.m. right here on Crime Junkie Jury.